I'm sorry, girl. You gotta go. Mrs. Palfrey at the Claremont. That's why we're really here. I loved this book. Let's hop in. But life has changed, and to save her sanity, she must change with it. So, Mrs. Palfrey at the Claremont by Elizabeth Taylor, and as I like to say, not that Elizabeth Taylor, the other Elizabeth Taylor, the one who's an author and not an actress. So this is a novel about an endearing older woman. I don't read many narratives about senior citizens, but this was a joy. More stories about senior citizens, please. The mature population who has gone to live at the Claremont Hotel in London in her latter days. Her daughter is living in Scotland with her Scottish husband. She doesn't have a close relationship with her grandson. Her daughter is her only child, and her husband has already passed away. This is a recipe for loneliness, but Mrs. Palfrey, she gains relationship and friendship not just with the other seniors who live at the Claremont, but she forms an unlikely friendship and connection with a young man named Ludo. Mrs. Palfrey is one of those English women who is very put together. Like as an American, and I'm pretty sure like my cousins across the pond, how you doing? For all my to all of my Americans who are acquainted with the Northeast, whether you've lived there or you just know the stereotype, we all know how you doing? How you doing? What are you doing? We all know, right? Okay. What are you doing? How you doing? Speaking of stereotypes, Mrs. Palfrey is like what I think your average American thinks about when they think of a very well put together, mature English woman. So pristine and reserved and precise in her mannerisms, very almost uptight, perhaps. And I'm pretty sure that my cousins across the pond, you guys know exactly what I'm talking about because these people exist. There is a truth behind a stereotype. But this is the woman that she's obviously upper class or maybe upper middle class, but she's definitely, lived a lifestyle that the majority of us cannot relate to. Very refined and dignified. She knows, and so that's what I mean. That's the type of image here that I'm trying to create. Not that I don't need to create it. Miss Elizabeth Taylor, she created it for us in this character, Mrs. Palfrey. I'm all over the place. She is very put together, refined, well-mannered, and proper. Okay? She knows how to put her best face forward, even in awkward social situations. She's used to, I was burping, excuse me. Is it a Lana video if I'm not burping? It's not. She's used to playing her role, but now in her lonelier days at the hotel as a widow, and as she's adjusting to her new environment, there are times when that perfectly practiced facade slips, and one cannot always wear a mask. And life has a way of showing itself on one's face, even if you try to hide it. When she was young, she had an image of herself to present to her new husband, whom she admired, then to herself, thirdly to the natives. I am an Englishwoman. Now, no one reflected that image of herself, and it seemed diminished. It had 2/3 of its erstwhile value, no husband, no natives. So reference to the natives, her and her husband had spent some time abroad, living abroad as well. Saving face had been an important part of life in the Far East, and Mrs. Palfrey tried to save hers now. Trouble usually comes from doing so, and it came to her, for it involved her telling lies, and in being obliged to remember the lies when she told them. So now that she's at the Claremont, she has been telling these little lies about her family, her grandson, and even Ludo to make her life seem less lonely than it is. And that's all I'm going to say. Miss Palfrey is the central character in this novel. And because she is the central character and she is more mature in years, this novel heavily centers around the realities of aging. When one knows that their days are numbered, and one's body can't perform the way it used to. You've got aches and pains, arthritis, you're stiff, you don't have the energy you used to have. And relationships aren't what they used to be, either because people have passed away, people have moved on. That can be a sobering reality. Elizabeth Taylor also uses the other elderly characters surrounding Mrs. Palfrey to highlight how they are each grappling with this state of their lives now, being senior citizens, and in many cases being forgotten because they are senior citizens. The disaster of being old was innate, feeling safe to venture anywhere, of seeing freedom put out of reach. And then as one gets older, people die or drop out of one's life for other reasons. One is left with very little. It was hard work being old. It was like being a baby in reverse. Every day for an infant means some new little thing learned. Every day for the old means some little thing lost. Names slip away, dates mean nothing. Sequences become muddled and faces blurred. Both infancy and age are tiring times. Elizabeth Taylor expertly shows and not tells. And I know that this is very cliche when we talk about writers. It's better to show and not tell. One way that she shows this is how Mrs. Palfrey and her senior citizen companions and peers at the Claremont cling to routine. That's how she portrays this, how they take pleasure in the seemingly mundane because the mundane is where they're getting some sense of satisfaction. And it's both endearing and humorous, but at the same time, there's an undercurrent of melancholy to it. Meal times and planned outings with friends or relatives, visits from guests, these are the type of things that provide them with a sense of excitement. However, they have to rely on other people to provide these reprieves, and this is where people can be disappointing and disappointed. Because as a young person or a younger person, or you have an active family life, or if you're a young person and you're not really tied to much because maybe you don't have your own family yet, or you have a certain type of freedom, just even the freedom and the gift of mobility, like your body is able to do what you want and need it to do. You have the energy to do certain things. An outing with a friend is going to be different when you're somebody like Mrs. Palfrey, who has to rely on somebody else and some of these other characters, somebody else's kindness or sometimes obligation. Even if they don't want to do it, there's this sense of, oh, this person is doing this out of obligation, which is a kind of feeling in and of itself for these exciting little outings or treats. And if somebody from the outside world of this Claremont doesn't follow through, doesn't show up one day when they promised to show up, you have these characters who are always on the brink of experiencing disappointment or deferred hope. No one wished to appear greedy or obsessed by food. The food made the breaks in the day, and menus offered a little choosing, and satisfactions and disappointments as once life had. She thought bitterly of sitting there, waiting for someone to turn up. Out of the kindness of their heart, will they come or won't they? And so make oneself a fool. I don't take people out anymore, she said aloud. All wished that she would stop. I wouldn't know where to take them. Of course it's nice to be given a treat, but not if it's always that way round. So another interesting way that Taylor portrays this are of course you've got these groups of seniors living together and they gossip amongst themselves, or they're assessing the other inhabitants of the Claremont who live there. And they notice when somebody's plans don't come through, or that guest didn't come visit, and so they're watching. You want your guests to show up because it saves face. It's this very interesting tension that Elizabeth Taylor portrays very well. But she doesn't just focus on the loneliness and disappointment of the senior citizens here and the mature here. We have Ludo, Mrs. Claremont's unexpected friend. And I'm not going to go much into that relationship, but I do want to focus on Ludo very briefly, because Elizabeth Taylor does say that the young also feel lonely and isolated. They can, for different reasons. So she's really showing that loneliness isn't age specific. It's really one's circumstances in life that create a certain type of loneliness and isolation. Sometimes you're just dealt certain cards, either in life or in a season of life. It's not always all the time. Sometimes you just go through seasons of loneliness and isolation that contribute to this sense of malaise. At these times, she felt that anything would be better than being alone. He fretted through it and always came to the end of it with a sense of wide ennui and wasted time. It is lonely here, in your love nest. You never could imagine the so-kin loneliness of a Sunday afternoon. So he lives in South Kensington in London. So that's where he's at. Let's wrap this up. Nice, quick little review. I adored this book. I really did. Elizabeth Taylor is so Mrs. Palfrey of the Claremont, and just Elizabeth Taylor in general, is the epitome of what I love about British fiction, written not just in the mid-century, because I talked about this in my Dorothy Whipple review for Young Anne, but also in the 1970s and the 1980s and early 90s. The Brits are still writing some bangers. There's just something about that time period. So you could really say mid-century, mid-20th century, even through the 90s or even through the early 90s. There's just something about the storytelling. And maybe it's because, of course, World War I and World War II are going to shape certain types of narratives. And the Brits wrote about that time period in a very specific way. And I dig it. I really do. Elizabeth Taylor is quintessentially, again, a British novelist. And I think she's so underrated. She's sharp, she's witty, she's very funny. This book does have an undercurrent of melancholy to it, but this book is actually at times laugh out loud hilarious. There are times I LOL. She has a little bit of cheeky humor in there, just tastefully snarky at times. And she may even allude to some sexual humor, but it's still so tastefully done and cheeky. It is what makes British literature, in my opinion, stick out. She has a way of getting to the core of a theme without being over the top. She's never overwritten. She's very subtle. Every single word that she put on paper is important. It's calculated. She's not mincing words. She's not wasting words. She's not fluffy. She packs a lot in a novel that's under 200 pages. And yes, even though, again, we're talking about aging and death, because if you're talking about aging, death is inevitable in some cases, there's still something that keeps it from feeling oppressive. There's a lightness to it. And again, it's that humor and self-awareness. And the relationship between Ludo and Mrs. Palfrey was just very endearing. And it wasn't as cookie cutter perfect as I expected it to be. Elizabeth Taylor, I'm thinking about Mrs. Palfrey. Elizabeth Taylor puts some conflict in there to keep it nuanced. This was just a delight to read. It was short, sweet, to the point. Again, under 200 pages. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. And is one of my most memorable reads of the year thus far. It wasn't a 5-star read. It was close, but it wasn't a 5-star read. One of my most memorable reads of the year. It was just a delight. So, to my British cousins across the pond, are you familiar with Elizabeth Taylor? If not, naughty. Hop to it. She's one of your own. That's it. Feel free to like, subscribe, leave me a comment below. Are you an Elizabeth Taylor fan? And if so, what is your favorite book that you've read from her so far? I've read 3 of her novels thus far, and I have all of them. She wrote 12 novels, and I have an entire collection of her short stories right here. This is that big book, which I have not dived into yet. So yes, and she's just quick and snappy to read. Another author I need to dive back into is Barbara Pym. Those two are just riots. Okay. Anyway, that's it. Feel free to follow me on Instagram where I give to more book shenanigans. Feel free. I also post all my book content there first. So I post my reviews in my static feed every Sunday. That's it. I'll see you later. That was an awkward end. Bye.